Guys, we've got the brand new Porsche Rally Cross from Primal RC on the bench, and this thing looks absolutely gorgeous. From tons of real LED lighting on the front, to that famous Porsche whale tail in the rear, and this beautiful blue and orange Gulf livery, I cannot wait to dig into this thing. Let's check it out. This giant 1/6 scale rally car is on a platform I've never seen before, and is a collaboration between Primal RC and Traction Hobby. In order to take a closer look at that gorgeous Porsche body, we need to push these two tabs here, and then one in the rear, and then the body slides right off 3 pins on the front. The body itself is painted Lexan, although it does have quite a few stickers on it for details, such as these lines right here, and the stickers around the windows and doors. Flipping it over, you can see we have full wheel wells in the rear and in the front, as well as a complete driver figure area. We also have a light controller, which we'll be taking a closer look at in a minute, and that goes out to a bunch of lights in the back and a ton of lights in the front. Inside, you can see there are scale details such as a full roll cage, and then peeking in the window, you can see we've got 2 driver figures and sort of a dash. And interestingly, the whale tail / engine cover is a separate piece. I suspect they couldn't get this vacuum formed with the rest of the body. Most of these Lexan bodies are made by creating a form, heating a sheet of plastic, and then sucking it down onto the form with vacuum. And sometimes these fine details like this can be really difficult to do on something like that because they get pulled too thin. Overall, I would say this body is absolutely gorgeous, and the Lexan on it is medium thick, and it should hold up pretty well, though we'll just have to find that out when we bash it. Primal RC is calling this 1/6 scale, but that's 1/6 scale in rally car dimensions, and as you can see here, it's actually about the same size as a 1/8 scale truggy, though of course it is a bit more narrow. This thing looks pretty cool and unique with a big 6S drivetrain, some awesome aluminum bits, and some things we've never seen before on a rally car. The stock wheels that come on this car look really nice. These are classic Porsche style wheels. The wheel nuts actually have Porsche logos on them, and these aren't stickers. These feel like real metal. These are serrated. The wheels themselves are just standard plastic. These on-road tires are very sticky feeling. As you can see, they say Primal RC on one side and Traction Hobby on the other. These are 102 millimeters in diameter and 44 millimeters wide. We don't have any venting on the wheel or on the tire, which is an interesting choice. And of course, if on-road isn't your thing, this thing comes with a full spare set of off-road wheels and tires. I'm really glad to see they included a different wheel pattern on here. These wheels are vented, and these tires have a more off-road tread and a slightly harder compound. And they're actually smaller than the on-road tires, which is interesting to see. I'm kind of surprised that they chose not to glue those tires on. Gluing tires isn't too difficult, but a lot of people don't have tire glue, and it can be kind of a pain. Fortunately, the ones that come on the car are glued on, so you're not going to need glue right away. Now, if you like seeing complete teardowns of the latest releases, make sure you get subscribed because we've got them here first. Subscribing also tells me I'm doing a good job on these videos and lets me know you want to see more just like them. Behind those wheels, we've got fairly standard 17 millimeter hexes on the front and on the rear, though the rear is interesting because it has a built-in spacer. I'm never a huge fan of this kind of design because it means the arms are shorter, and I'd rather have the arms just be the correct length, but at least these do look standard, so you could swap them out if you wanted to. On the front end, we have a big, beefy foam bumper that should be great for absorbing hits, and we've got those 3 holes in it that line up with these 3 pins on the body, making it to where you don't need a latch in the front. And then in the back to match it, we've got a nice looking little under tray here with exhaust tips on it, which Primal RC has molded a carrying handle into. This is a fantastic touch and something a lot of manufacturers just don't seem to do. Digging deeper into this chassis, you can see we've got a ton of machined aluminum here. This looks really well optioned straight from the factory, though I did notice that the back end of the car was sitting quite a bit higher than the front end out of the box. That might change when we put a battery in it, though the battery tray is toward the front of the car, so I'm not sure that's going to be the case. The screws on this are all hex-headed machine screws. There is branding on these screws, and they seem to be reasonably good quality. The shock that screw is holding in is almost completely aluminum. This lower spring perch is machined aluminum, and I like this little detail here. Obviously, the spring is steel, but the shock body is aluminum. The lower shock cap is aluminum. The upper shock cap is aluminum. And the only thing that's plastic is this lower eye. Removing this cap, we can see that we have a bladder style shock here. It's a fairly flat bladder, and this shock is pretty full. The shock fluid in here feels medium thick, which means there's plenty of room to go thicker or thinner depending on what kind of bashing you're going to be doing. With a nice thick shaft, I have to say these shocks look pretty nice. None of them are leaking out of the box. Of course, their durability is something we're just going to have to test when we actually bash it, because looking nice is one thing, but actually performing well is something else. This rear bumper comes off in fairly typical fashion with just 2 screws in the bottom and 2 screws in the top. The plastic feels pretty good. There's not a ton of crazy flashing all over it, and I'd say this does feel like reasonably high quality plastic. So far, I have to say I'm fairly impressed with this. The design itself does seem pretty basic, but we've got quite a few good quality looking parts, and that's giving me hope that this thing's gonna be durable and fun. These rear upper link mounts are just standard through screws with nuts. The nuts are nylock. And the links themselves seem fairly beefy. These ends are pretty large. Obviously, these links are steel, and the turnbuckles themselves are 5 millimeters in diameter, which is pretty thick. The rear shock tower is a pretty low profile affair. It's only 4 millimeters thick and does have quite a few lightning holes cut in it. Fortunately, on these kinds of cars, the shock towers don't really need to be that strong because it's very unlikely they're going to take any hits from the outside, as all of that's protected by the shell. I do like this chamfer detail here. They get this by anodizing the part and then going back and doing the chamfers. It's an extra step that they don't need to take, and I think it looks really nice. Holding the included rear sway bar in is a dreaded 1.5 millimeter hex head grub screw. This is a fairly small area, though I would still like to see bigger grub screws everywhere on these cars. It is a pretty big car. And then in a real head scratcher, the sway bar is actually mounted to the bulkhead with Phillips screws. These little guys are self-tappers, so I guess there are some self-tappers. I'm really surprised to see these. They really shouldn't be on this car. Switch to hex head for everything. These aren't a problem, but people think cheap when they see Phillips. And now to removing just a few more screws. These bottom ones are some real long boys. And pulling the D-block off, again, this is really nicely machined aluminum. This bulkhead cover should come right off of here. And it reveals a very shiny differential. I don't know if this differential case is polished aluminum or stainless steel. We'll take a closer look at that when we get it apart. We do have shims on both sides. Nicely, these shims do slide right over the output cups. That means you can adjust the shimming without having to take it apart. There are sealed bearings in here, which you would definitely expect to see. The grease on it is moderately inoffensive. It does smell like not much, so there's not much sulfur content in it. That's good to see. Sulfur content's not a problem for lubrication, but it is a problem if it gets on your couch. These screws going into the metal housing don't appear to have much thread locker on them, but again, using that smell-o-vision, they do have some, though we'll definitely be adding more when we put it back together. With those screws out, we can get our first look inside this shiny boy, and you can see it is fluid-filled, so it's going to be a sealed differential. This ring gear has a very aggressive spiral bevel pattern on it. The spiral bevel nature of these gears allows them to be stronger by having more physical tooth on the gear, and the constant engagement puts less stress on them. Taking a closer look in here past the gasket, we have one of the most full differentials I've ever seen on an RTR, and again, a very shiny case, kind of suspiciously shiny. I don't think this is aluminum. It's not magnetic, and actually, yeah, after wiping off some of the fluid, this looks like a machined aluminum case. Very nice. The internal gears are sintered steel, like we see on pretty much every RC car, and overall, this looks like a great differential. As we put this back together, we need to make sure we're very careful not to get any differential fluid down in these screw holes. We are going to be using thread lock, and silicone differential fluid will stop the thread lock from working. I've been careless with this in the past and had screws back out, so be careful with that. Overall, very impressed with this differential. I love to see the aluminum housing, and having put this together, I can tell you this is probably one of the smoothest differentials I've ever felt. This is giving me high hopes for this car. That differential is going to be driving universal joints in the rear. We've been seeing a lot more universal joints on cars recently, and I'm wondering if RC metallurgy's gotten to the point where these U joints are actually stronger than CVDs, which is why they're being used more often. These shafts are 4 millimeters in diameter, which is probably going to be fine because the tires that come on these cars are pretty small and aren't going to get a ton of traction, and we're not going to be jumping these things 15 feet in the air, so there's not going to be a huge amount of stress on these. Again, though, we'll just have to see what happens when we bash it. Connecting that to the car is a fairly standard looking arm. It appears as though these arms are going to be unique in all four corners of the car. We do have droop screws here. The hubs, again, look relatively generic. They are in double shear at the top, and then we can get a closer look at those extended 17 millimeter hexes in the rear. The inner hinge pins appear to be pretty high quality. They are also 4 millimeter, and again, I'm not terribly worried about that because that big shell of a body helps protect the arms and the pins as well in a crash. The plastic on this bulkhead feels very strong and thick, and then on the inside we can see more of that not terrible grease and the pinion gear, which is also heavily spiral beveled to match the ring gear. All right, let me get all this put back together because the really cool stuff is that way. The front end is similar to the rear with a really nice looking 6061 aluminum tower, full aluminum shocks, adjustable upper links and toe links. The upper links are in double shear. The toe links are only in single shear. This does use kingpin style steering. We've got regular screws going through for pivots, though there are steel inserts in here, so it's not actually pivoting on those screws, which is nice to see. The arms do look fairly similar to the rear, though they're not identical, so we do have unique arms in all four corners of this vehicle. And that's all attached to this really thick flat plate aluminum chassis. It's great to see manufacturers stepping up their game on chassis thickness, and this one is a full 4 millimeters thick, but it's what's attached to the chassis in the middle that's really interesting. This car is being powered by an 8BL150 150 G2 6S Hobbywing ESC that's actually Hobbywing branded, though they're using an XT60 on here, which seems really silly to me. I don't think I've ever seen an XT60 with an 8BL 150. This thing's rated at 60 amps continuous, which is just not enough. Taking a look in this really nice manual, I don't see any of the specifications for tuning of the ESC. So once we get a battery hooked up to this, we'll have to see what they have available. Hopefully we can adjust the BEC at least. To power that ESC, we have a fairly robust looking battery tray. It does look a little short at the moment, but I think we can actually move this side out a little bit. With the tray stretched as far out as it can be in its slots on the furthest holes, we're getting about 52 millimeters in width and approximately 152 millimeters in length. That's going to be big enough for a lot of 6S batteries, but not for the biggest ones you can get. Through the ESC, that battery is going to be powering a fairly generic looking 4074 2000 kV motor. This motor doesn't say Hobbywing on it, but I'm sure it is a Hobbywing. With just 2 screws removed, this motor slides up and out of its mount. It's nice that it comes up at an angle so you don't have to worry about taking these side pods off to get it out of there. This looks like a fairly standard mount, which should be compatible with a bunch of different motors. The Mod 1 pinion gear on it appears to be 15 tooth, and there is a decent amount of adjustment for putting a larger pinion on here. We've also got plenty of room out the back for running a longer motor. Controlling that's going to be the receiver inside this really nice looking machined aluminum receiver box that appears to be waterproofed. Interestingly, everything branded in here is branded Traction Hobby. It makes me wonder exactly what Primal RC had to do with the construction of this. There's a Primal RC sticker on the body, but nothing inside is labeled Primal RC. Taking this lid off, we can see there is no seal here between it and the box. So while as this is going to be splash resistant, it's not waterproof. You don't want to submerge this. Controlling everything is a really nice receiver. This FlySky FSR7V is a gyro receiver on the ANT protocol, and it uses this FlySky G7P transmitter, which is probably the nicest transmitter I've ever seen on an RTR. This was actually my daily driver transmitter for quite a while, and other than having a fairly clunky interface, this is a really nice unit and is fantastic to see on an RTR. One thing I find interesting is that even though this is a gyro receiver, they didn't adhere it down to the inside of the box. This means it could move around in the box a little bit while you're running. That has the potential to mess with the gyro, but I guess we'll see how it works. Now, when MakerFire asked me if I wanted to check this car out, there will be a no commission link in the description to them, by the way. I wasn't too sure until I saw this one feature, which I'm super excited about. Because not only does this car have a really nice aluminum case center differential, it also has a selectable front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive module. And on a rally car, that's going to be a lot of fun. Let's see how they're doing it. As you can see, the front output on the center differential is splined, and then pulling the guts out of here, we can see we have a dog clutch that slides back and forth on that spline and either engages or disengages the front drive through the use of this shift fork. This shift fork is metal, and all of this looks pretty darn high quality. We've got a big support bearing in the front of the case, and then behind it is a fairly traditional looking center differential, though the fluid in this feels very thin. I'm gonna leave it alone though, and we'll see how it goes. Most of the center differential mount is also machined aluminum, though the top cap is plastic. There's definitely a lot of aluminum on this car though. We've seen selectable four-wheel drive on plenty of crawlers before, but I don't think I've ever seen it on a basher. I was curious to see how they were going to make it robust, and it does look like they did a good job on this. Between the aluminum case and the beefy components, I'm hoping this isn't going to break. Shifting for that's being controlled by a fairly generic looking mini servo. The servo horn does have a spring on it, which is pretty weak. That's designed to help protect the servo, as it doesn't always shift in immediately because of the way those dogs work. Next to that, we have a Traction Hobby branded steering servo that strangely has the exact same color case as Traxxas servos. I don't think this is from Traxxas though. Attached to that servo is a generic looking plastic servo horn. With all the aluminum on here, I'm kind of surprised to see plastic in this place, but maybe it's a cheap and easy to replace fuse if there's a problem. Both servos screw into an aluminum plate, and as you can see, they use plenty of thread locker here. This is labeled as a TH1828HV. I couldn't find any information about that online or in the manual, so let's just pull it apart and judge it for ourselves. We've got no O-ring on these screws. That doesn't mean it's not at least a little bit water resistant, as the screw head makes a pretty good seal on the plastic case, but we do know right off the bat that this thing isn't being made waterproof. Actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. These screws don't go inside the case, so them not being waterproofed doesn't matter. What does matter is that we have an O-ring here and the wires are sealed, so this is definitely being made to be waterproof. We've got a nice big brushed motor here, and then looking at the top, We've got a combination of brass and steel gears. Brass gears are going to be weaker, but they're also further up the gear train, so they don't experience as much torque. And we've got a nice looking seal here at the top and 2 brass inserts for the shafts. Overall, I'd say this looks like a very decently made servo, and hopefully for an RTR, we won't be replacing it right away. That servo is powering an adjustable servo saver through an adjustable turnbuckle. This is all composite with an aluminum nut. The Ackerman output bar is aluminum, though everything is in single shear here, which again, given the size of the tires, probably won't be an issue. Speaking of which, I was looking at these stock tires trying to see what would be compatible with them, and they're very close in size to D-Boot's Hoons, so these should fit perfectly, and they're just a little bit smaller than standard buggy tires, which means we might have a bunch of options for off-road running. The last connector coming out of this receiver box goes to the body for the lights. Before we check that out, we need to power this thing up, and to power this thing up, we need to get rid of this silly XT60 connector. Since we're going to be going straight to 6S, and all of my 6S batteries are QS8s, that's what I'm going to use, but there are plenty of people that use XT90s and EC5s on these kinds of vehicles, so those should work fine too. Every time I use this little holder, I get asked where I got it from. I got it on Amazon, and you can find it by searching for RC connector solder holder. With that being said, why don't we give one of these away? All you need to do is like the video, put any comment down in the comment section, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll pick someone to win. Now with that all soldered up and me totally getting the polarity right the first time, which is why I showed it on camera, let's see what features we have on this ESC. For batteries, I was going to go with this Genzace bashing unit, but as you can see, it's not quite going to fit in the battery tray. It's pretty close though. So instead we're going to go with this SMC Speedrun Drag Series pack. This really isn't designed for bashing, but I haven't had a chance to use it yet as I don't really do speedrunning yet, so we'll try it out in here. And now hooking up the programmer, unfortunately, as you can see, there are only 5 options here, which means we don't have the full suite of configurability on this ESC, and because it's not listed anywhere in the manual, we don't know what those configurations are, but given past experience, I suspect BEC voltage isn't one of them. One nice thing the manual does give us is a full set of instructions on how to program the lights, and they even tell us how to turn off the turn signals. Speaking of those lights, we are just about ready to get the wheels put on this thing and see what they look like, but we've got one more thing we need to do first, and let's glue up these other tires. I'm going to warn you now, if you're looking for a tutorial on how to do a glue job that looks perfect, this isn't the right place for it. But if you just want a functional and practical method, start by putting the tire on the wheel, as you'd expect. Make sure you have everything nice and seated exactly how you want it. Then take some good water-thin CA glue and just run a little light bead around the outside. This will wick into the seam between the tire and the wheel and will hold them together, though it is going to make a little bit of a mess at the outside of the tire. I don't really care, but if you do, there are better methods to do this. Once you've done that, just do the same thing with all 4 tires. Oh, and by the way, gluing the tires on backwards on the rim, that's a pretty advanced technique that not everybody's going to want to undertake. Obviously, I'm pretty skilled, so I don't mind gluing my tires on the wrong way around. Seriously though, don't do that. These are directional. The letters are on the outside. It's probably not going to make a massive difference, but they're directional for a reason. Now, if you like seeing advanced skills such as how to really poorly glue tires on backwards, make sure you get subscribed because you're only going to see that here. And once you've done that, let's go see what this beautiful blue beast can do. Before we do that though, I need to tell you a few very important things about this transmitter. When I first turned mine on, and probably when you get yours, it's going to be in Chinese. This is pretty easy to fix. You just go down to the little transmitter symbol using the hat here, go over to the first menu option, that's going to be the settings, and then the first menu option here is going to be language. You can click on it, then push up or down, and it'll switch it to English. The other thing I want to mention is the gyro. Not only is it not turned on when you get the car, but it's also not set up properly. At least mine wasn't. With the car turned on, if you go into the menu, go to the set area, and then go to SVC, you'll see it's turned off. This is the gyro. You can just turn that on, but it's also reversed. So you want to go down here to normal and set it to reverse. Otherwise, it's going to be running the gyro the wrong way, and it's not really going to be helping you very much. There are a bunch of other options you can set for the gyro in here. I'm not going to get into that. There are other videos that talk about that, but at least this will get the gyro working for you. All right, now let's go bash this thing. All right, guys, fully charged 6S pack. First thing we need to do is turn our lights on. We've got headlights, more lights, and even more lights. Now with the street tires on here, let's get a speed run. We've got a lot of options with the lights. Like I said, that's all in the manual, so you can look that up yourself. But we've got all the lights on for now, and full throttle. Pretty stable. I do have a little bit of gyro dialed in. Got quite a bit of dive at braking. Still very stable though. It does like to skid a little bit when I get on the brakes really hard. One more pass. All right, let's see what we got out of her. Feels pretty good so far. All right, 45 miles an hour. That's not too bad. Now switching into 2-wheel drive, let's see if we can do a burnout. That's actually got a decent amount of traction for 2-wheel drive, but oh yeah, she spins around. It feels pretty well balanced though, not too bad. Obviously this two-wheel drive is not going to be super practical, and most people are going to want to run four-wheel drive most of the time, but it does work. Now, one interesting thing I'm noticing is because that center differential isn't very tight, in two-wheel drive, it tends to just burn most of the power out through the differential, and we're not actually getting a ton of wheel spin. I think we would need to run a bit thicker center differential fluid in order to really take advantage of that two-wheel drive option. Of course, most of the time we're going to be running it in four-wheel drive, and it gets plenty of traction in four-wheel drive. Get a nice low high-speed pass out of it. Oh, flipped it over. Okay, so it will flip if you're really hard on it. These tires do have quite a bit of traction. Overall, it does feel fairly well balanced. And of course, being 6S, it does have plenty of power to roast all four of those tires. Now on some smoother asphalt with some sand on it, we can get some decent drifts going. That gyro's putting in work to keep it pointed the way I want it to go. And these tires do get good grip. I have to say this thing does look absolutely incredible and does have plenty of power. These tires are holding up pretty well. And getting into that sand, it seems like a pretty awesome ride too. I'm looking forward to getting over there. It does get through the grass okay. This has quite a bit of ground clearance, especially for a rally car, so it does handle those sorts of things fairly well. Moving over to the sand, it does kick up an awesome rooster tail, and these street tires do seem to be holding up pretty well. I'm actually surprised they're getting the traction that they are. The gyro definitely helps with this, but yeah, this is definitely some rally car fun on this sand. That one flip I had on the pavement seems to have been an anomaly. It has plenty of low center of gravity traction and really doesn't seem to want to flip over on these slightly lower traction surfaces. So in general, it's probably not something you're going to have to be worried about. So it looks like we're going to be sticking with the on-road tires for this bashing session. I'll let you know why when we get back on the bench. I'm really not that disappointed though, because these on-road tires seem to be doing very, very well in this gravel, which is way, way bigger than scale. The suspension's doing a lot of good work, and it's actually keeping the chassis off the ground, which is really nice for a rally car, because usually when you start getting into this big gravel on a rally car, it really tears up that chassis, and I'm hoping to not see too many scratches when we get back on the bench. And yeah, this thing is fun and has a ton of power. Let's see how it does in some deeper sand. Now this is the kind of terrain that a rally car, especially one on street tires, probably shouldn't be run on. But being how this one is 1/6 scale, it's got pretty big tires on it, and again, it's got pretty good ground clearance, and it's handling this absolutely no problem whatsoever. Even with these street tires, I'm barely on the throttle here, and it is just plowing right through these fairly deep ruts like they're not even there. This thing is actually going to be pretty darn versatile, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun on a lot of different terrains. I'm not quite sure how it's going to handle deep grass. We're going to find that out in a minute. But for now, let's see it shoot up some rooster tails. I just got it all over my face. This thing is absolutely awesome and looks incredible doing what it's doing. Seeing that suspension moving and seeing that beautiful Porsche body getting all dirty is just absolutely awesome. This thing is fun, and it seems to be tuned very well for a variety of surfaces. So far, the worst surface was actually the tarmac, where it seemed to want to swap ends while braking, although that is kind of Porsche-like, so maybe they did it on purpose, but this is awesome. Now before we try it on grass, let's switch over to these off-road tires, and let me explain why I didn't switch over to them out in the dirt. The 17mm hex wrench I brought simply didn't work. See how loose it is? These nuts are just about 17mm, but for aesthetics, they cut off the points. Those points are what most wrenches grip onto, so if there's much slop like there is in this particular wrench, it just slips. Hopefully this wrench will take them off. Yes, it will, but as you can see, it is getting stuck on there. And this probably explains why those wheel nuts weren't super tight to begin with. For my own ease of use while putting on these other tires, I'm gonna go ahead and switch over to some M2C wheel nuts, which work a lot better. And even though they don't look as nice as these Porsche wheel nuts, they aren't sacrificing functionality for looks. I'm gonna go ahead and get the other three swapped out, and I'll see you outside. Now, the beauty of a big rally car like this should be its versatility, but to be honest with you, this thing really isn't doing that well in the tall grass. It is handling it, but it's struggling quite a bit, and if I give it too much throttle, it just spins out. Obviously, these tires aren't
perfect for this kind of terrain, but honestly, with the kind of ground clearance it has, I would have expected it to do better. I think if we put some knobby buggy tires on there, it might, but then I'd be worried about clearing the body and tearing up the fender flares. This is working, but to be honest, again, it's really not super happy doing this. And I think where it's its happiest is in that dirt, in the gravel, on tarmac, and areas like that. This grass is pretty wet, so if you had dry grass, you would probably have better luck. But even if I really get on the throttle, it doesn't pick up much speed because it's just spinning those tires. It does do a little jump pretty nicely, but overall, it doesn't seem thrilled on this kind of terrain.
So what do I think of the Primal RC Traction Hobby Porsche 1/6 scale rally car? Well, for one thing, it is undeniably beautiful. Generally speaking, beauty is subjective, but I think most people will agree this is a good looking car. On certain terrains, such as loose dirt and gravel, it handles really, really well. It also handles well on nice, smooth asphalt, but in some other terrains, such as grass, it didn't do as well as the 1/10 scale Relarlo rally car. And as undeniably beautiful as it is, it also has some undeniable rough edges. First of all, these wheel nuts simply don't work properly with a regular wheel wrench. The body mounts, while secure, suffer from the same problem as the Forest Mojave. When these pins get fine grit in them, they tend to lock it up. I was able to get the body off, but it wasn't easy the first time. One thing that isn't quite as rough of an edge as I thought it was is this 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive module. I was reviewing our teardown footage from earlier, and I realized that this is actually designed to lock the front output onto the differential when it's in 2-wheel drive mode, and I'm pretty sure my servo just isn't quite going far enough to actually do that when it's activated. So instead of being a design flaw, that's actually just a programming problem with the transmitter. Though if someone gets this car and it's not programmed right, they're gonna think there's something broken. And then things like the transmitter not coming in English are small details that I'd like to see addressed. Now don't get me wrong, I still really, really like this car. Mechanically, it's an absolute tank. Those differentials are really, really solid. I love the electronics that are in it. It's one of the most beautiful RC cars I've ever seen, though it is a little bit tarnished by things like these stickers not being properly applied that dirt has now gotten behind. Again, that's a simple thing to fix though. But overall, I do really, really like the car. The question is though, do I $900 like it? Because that's how much this thing costs. And that's a tough one to answer because yeah, this is a $900 toy car, but they're all toy cars. If you really like this Porsche, if you like the features that come with it, if you want a big, powerful rally car that's gonna be fun on a lot of different surfaces, this could be the car for you. Yes, it does feel decidedly first generation, but the first generation problems really aren't that bad. And in general, it will put a smile on your face when you pull that trigger. Pulling the trigger on watching one of these videos will put a smile on your face as well.